Hello, welcome to At the Forefront FinTech Conversations. I'm Mark Dowd, Managing Partner here at Forefront, and today we're joined by Ben Wood, Executive Director of the Risk Global Group at InfoPro Digital. Ben, thanks for being on.
Lovely. Thanks for having me, Mark. It's good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Um, so to start, maybe tell us a little bit about the Risk Global Group that you oversee. I think a lot of our viewers will be familiar with some of the brands that fall under it, like WatersTechnology and Risk.net and FX Markets, but they might not be familiar with the breadth of the portfolio. Can you tell us exactly what comprises the group?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, we're part of the InfoPro Digital Group, which some people may not have heard of. InfoPro is a large French B2B publisher, data and information services business with about 4,000 employees. So we're part of a bigger group, and then we have a Risk Global part of that, which I lead. And in that group, we kind of cover the whole, I would term it kind of ecosystem of the financial spectrum across a variety of different brands, and they fit together quite nicely. And the way that I often explain it is kind of using risk as the anchor piece, because risk
Mhm.
covers both front office sales and trading. So you have that element covered, which obviously FX markets covers as well. And then WatersTechnology looks at the trading technology and the data that help power that market's engine. And then when you look at the risk management side, which is another big part of risk's coverage, we have risk, which looks at financial risk and non-financial risk. Then we have a brand called 1LOD, which we acquired in June 24,
Mhm.
which looks at non-financial risk. And then you've got Chartis Research, which sits sort of underneath
Right.
it again, the technology side. So really deep market experts on all risk technology. And then the final piece is central banking, which looks at financial stability, policy, etc. So really, it kind of all sits together in a 360 piece, and the various brands pick off various parts of it. But increasingly, we're thinking about it more like a platform.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting portfolio, and Chartis in particular, I know they have a great reputation, but I think they probably don't get the notoriety they deserve. And I know I just saw Monica Somerville join, which she's obviously very well known in the space. So you all must be quite excited about that.
Yeah, and funnily enough, she's kind of gone full circle because she started her career at WatersTechnology way
That's
back in
right.
the
That's right. She did. Yeah.
millennium. But yeah, Monica's come in. She's been with us a month and already is out, speaking to clients and making a good impression on the brand. And we've got some quite big plans actually to try and make that brand more accessible, both from a vendor community in terms of how they interact with it and how they get more out of it. But then also from a bank point of view in terms of the different questions and way that you can consume the information. Because at the moment, most of it is pretty kind of standard, and there's lots of
Yeah.
things we can be doing. So I'll be interested to talk more about that as we go down the line. But yeah, Monica's making a great impression.
Nice. Um, Maybe talk a little bit about the evolution of this group. I know, I've been doing this for a while, and I know a lot of our listeners have been in the space for a while. They probably remember, Risk and Waters as Risk Waters Group way back when. And then I think you were part of Incisive Media for a while, and now InfoPro. So how have things evolved? How have they changed? What's stayed the same? What's the strategy now?
Well, I'd say the core kind of mission stayed the same, which is essentially all of our brands have to be able to kind of explain complex information in a way that adds value to our clients. We're not kind of really interested in covering the news. None of our brands cover the news. They're much more interested in the why, the what it means. So we solve that problem both in written word and at events, etc., and peer groups. And then the second area is for our kind of vendor community and our tech partners, which is helping them through our commercial channels, so giving them opportunities to create leads, etc. And I think what's in terms of the evolution of the group, I think if you roll back, 15 years or so, we were very much, it was either events or it was written word, and we used to sell subscriptions to individuals. Now we're very much more enterprise based. So we sell across financial institutions, which then means that the audiences that we've got are kind of much deeper. So we have relationships with far bigger groups of people. But also we serve the content in slightly different ways. So more recently, we've introduced data products, benchmarking products,
Mm.
also peer-to-peer networks as well. Because increasingly we find that people are very time poor, and
Yeah.
actually have a very specific 1 hour window to go and discuss a certain detailed topic with a peer group, and goes a long way. So because people like to consume in slightly different ways, we just try and be there at all of the different parts that they may want to interact with us.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. And from my standpoint, one of the through lines that I've always really appreciated and respected is the kind of fierce editorial independence that
Yeah,
the group maintains, which is, in the B2B publishing space, I think unique. Um,
yeah,
I suspect that makes your job on the commercial side maybe a little bit more challenging sometimes, but I know, from where I sit and a lot of the clients we speak with, we'd far prefer to see that model where what you're reading is legitimate and not influenced by any sort of commercial pressures.
yeah. Exactly. And we actually have a separate team, which is called the Ignite team, that do all of the commercial content because, yeah, you're right. I think, I probably don't care to imagine how many times that I've been involved in the, you know, ch- commercial versus editorial, and, that thou shall not be moved, which is great. We always say internally that, if we write something about a client and a client doesn't like it, that's not great from a commercial point of view, but actually, at least that means they know that we're doing the same for everyone else, right? We don't
That's
curry
good.
favor. So it works both ways.
Yeah, yeah. So, obviously the team that you have, both on the Ignite side and on the editorial side, that they are some of the best writers in the industry, I think is fair to say. Um, they my view is they cover kind of equal parts risk, compliance, and trading and data, at least in the titles that we work with the most. So I guess from where you sit, what are some of the biggest forces reshaping those industries, and how are they changing the way that institutions collaborate with each other?
Yeah, I think increasingly, kind of more and more, I think it's kind of impossible to solve a problem in a silo. I think, when we first started out, you have Waters Tech, and the trading technology piece was very clear. But actually now all of the things just converge. So, clearly AI is a thing that's shaping everything. And I was reading just last week Tony Makin's a couple of very, very interesting pieces on big tech and what it actually means, and where the industry is going. Um, but I think, in terms of AI, and when I think about our events again, for example, increasingly people don't really want to hear about anything hypothetical. Now we're much more in the operational phase, and people trying to understand, what does it actually mean, what's worked, what's broken, what are the problems that that people are facing. So that's kind of one. The
Yeah,
interesting thing as well, and I was thinking about this, because I met up with an old colleague last night, and we were talking about the old days of the North American Financial Information Summit in New York. I remember going in like 2007. And actually, some of the topics are still exactly relevant today. And you think
yeah,
about data, right? And I remember sitting in that because my background at the time was marketing and data. And I thought, actually, I understand all this stuff, right? The
mm,
big banks have the same data problems that we've got as a publisher or a media brand. But it's the same. It's obviously it's evolved and there's tech problems, but
yeah,
it's still pretty similar. Like, how do you get your data lined up? How do you get it structured? How do people make sense out of it? And there's different ways to do it, but it's still at the heart of it. Everybody says, if you haven't got good data, you're not going to be able to not be able to do anything. So that's still there, and I don't think that will probably ever change.
mm,
And look at things like fragmenting regulatory position at the moment. Different jurisdictions going different ways means quite a lot of work, and trying to understand where competitive advantage falls or uneven playing fields if you're a global bank. That's quite a big thing at the moment. Digital assets, those sorts of things, which are, come with a lot of like potentially risk profile that isn't necessarily as thought through. Fin crime, cyber. It's interesting. We went to we run a series of client events recently, and we had a number of CROs on, and the chief risk officers. Every single one of them said, and I should caveat this with, it was a month ago. Was that they're quite comfortable with financial risks. They know exactly, it's been modeled numerous times before, and loads of shocks. They know, whatever happens, they kind of can deal with it. But it's actually the non-financial risks, the whole, what happens with fin crimes, operational resilience, things go down. How do you deal with third parties? All of those sorts of things are really, really top of mind, because quite a lot of them aren't actually anywhere near as measurable as the old, financial risk. You understand the measures, models. It's quite difficult to kind of do that. And then kind of other things which are much more mainstream. Obviously, energy volatility at the moment, private credit. Every day there's an article somewhere talking about what might happen with that. So I think there's, as with all things, we always say volatility is quite good for us in terms of having more interesting, complex things to talk about. Technology changes are good and interesting as well, right? Nobody knows the answer. So I think I would summarize it as there's always challenges. Some of them are the same ones, just kind of packaged a little bit differently. But yeah, we're not short of things to cover at the moment.
Yeah, no, that's very true. All right, let's shift gears a little bit and talk about marketing, which both of us are involved in. So, content marketing is obviously a big part of what you offer, the content marketing services, and obviously the caliber of the folks you have generating the content, they do it quite well. So, when you talk to clients,
Mhm.
what conversations do you have about how you take the high quality content that you're producing and then translate it into legitimate real commercial value? Because I think that's an area where sometimes people struggle. They can get really good content, but how does this how does this turn into leads?
Yeah, and it's good. Again, it's a good question, and one that we get asked all the time. And I guess from our side, because we do lots of different activities, we kind of look at it from a platform approach. So if someone comes to us and says they generate leads, we don't just say, oh, come along and buy a booth at an event and cross your fingers and hope for the best. We
Yeah.
track it going into which sessions, and when they write content, we can match it with certain intent groups. So we know, like, if various people are looking for certain types of software, or not necessarily looking, but reading a number of articles on a certain type of software, then obviously if that person then is at an event and is exhibiting signs of behavior where they're going into certain sessions, then we know when we're talking to those content creators that actually there's a group of kind of what I would term more engaged leads. So we try and not get to chance. And really with the content, again, it hasn't. I don't think it's changed that much. I think people are very time poor, so getting in front of people is very, very difficult. But the best way to get through to people is through articulating ways to solve a problem that they don't know the answer to. And increasingly, we always tell all of our clients, like, if you come and speak at an event, don't come and speak on your own. Come with a client or two that you've got a really good case study to put in front of people, because it holds more weight when it comes from industry. And quite often we'll do things like surveys. So we'll turn a survey into a piece of content, so that then again it's from independent, and it's more thought. Well, it's not more thought leadership, but it's kind of thought leadership, but packaged up. There's something behind it, and it's difficult, right? Leads are hard. People, they're I would probably say more wise to it than they used to be, in terms of I'm going to get bombarded, or I've clicked on something. So it's always about the quality of the content for me. And you're right. We're in a fortunate position that we've got some good people who understand the market and can work with clients to generate those messages.
And I suspect it's also about playing the long game, right? Like if if a client comes to you who's never done this before, does not have much of a profile, and
Yeah.
expects to set up one stand or get take out um, one sponsored piece, and then the leads start flowing. That's just not going to happen. It's about building up credibility over the long term. I mean, it's a conversation we have all the time, and I suspect you do as well.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that we've been really trying to do over the past year is, I wouldn't say breaking down the silos of brands. Like one of the good things is that we have as a company is that everybody's fiercely proud of the brands that they work on. But we're
Yeah,
trying to get them to work more closely together with the other brands. And to give you an example, if you're a financial crime vendor, for example, you can work with Chartis and they can tell you exactly where you fit in the market. They can what your competitive positioning should be and at what your messaging should be. And then you can work with the brands like Risk, or you can go to one other D and be in front of a load of buyers of financial crime technology, to position yourself in the way that you should be, and kind of
yeah,
trying to take the element of chance out of it and actually use, instead of using our platform to compete with each other, using our platform to go out and say to somebody, actually, we can offer a right, start to finish, and we'll work with you and decide, with you what you want to do. And it's, to your point, it's very rarely one touch point and
yeah.
jackpot. I think that it doesn't matter who you partner with. I don't think you're going to get the answer if that's what you look for.
Yeah, no, we say that you may get lucky, and on the first try it works, but generally speaking, no. So you were talking about the buyers, and you've obviously done this for a while. I looked at your background, like it looks like you spent your whole career in the publishing industry, and almost 20 at either Incisive or now InfoPro. So, um, from where you sit, how is the institutional audience that you're targeting evolved over that time? And what are the leading marketers doing to stay relevant with those senior financial industry decision makers?
I think it's changed quite a lot. I think it's much more targeted than it used to be. And I go back to that point about time poor. I just think people, and we debate at length actually, and I know we'll talk about it in a while around what we're doing with our kind of events portfolio. But we have um we have a view where, if you take events after the pandemic, people only really go to big events or very small focused events. The kind of stuff in the middle has disappeared out in some regards. So in terms of how we work with people, again, it's finding out very much what they actually want. So in those, for example, in the bigger events, we'll still do really small round tables, and we know that we've got an audience of 1,500, 2,000 people, and actually it's far better to curate a round table from that audience, because we'll get a cross section of people that are all influencing the decision to buy. So I think, in terms of how things have evolved and how marketers are targeting, those buyers in financial institutions, I think it's far more sophisticated than it used to be. And I think, people are generally, if you look at open rates, it used to be, when I go back to when I wasn't such a grey-haired old man, right, you sent a few campaigns, you knew what ROI you were going to get, open rates, click-through rates, etc. The channels are completely different now, but it still goes back to the same message of you've got to have something to say, and if you continually bombard people, they just stop listening. So I think the same messages still hold true. You've got to know your audience, you've got to know what their pain points are, you helping them, how you're helping them, and then you've got to work out the right way to get in front of them.
Yeah, yeah, and I think some of the other truisms are, quality is important, credibility
Absolutely.
is important, especially amongst, an audience as sophisticated and discerning as this, where the sales cycles are so long, and where there's, so many people that influence the buying cycle.
Yeah.
Especially vendor who's looking to take on a Bloomberg or one of the big established vendors, or take on a bank or exchange. Like, you need to look the part, you need to sound the part, you need to really be seen as credible as those serious financial institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. And even, that you talk about the buying cycle, the buying cycle is very long and increasingly, even to the point where the whole, contract negotiation, you're sat in that kind of piece for much, much longer than you used to be. And, you worry about whether it's going to come in and it's not come in. And then you've got a whole host of KYC, and it's just the whole thing is completely changed. So yeah, it's staying the course and having quality materials and quality teams back up your messaging is very, very important.
Yeah, yeah. Um, all right. So you mentioned events. Let's talk a little bit about events. I know you're launching later this year the Risk and Market Show in London, New York, and Singapore. And unless I'm mistaken, the Risk and Market Show is kind of a combination of some of InfoPro's signature events. I think it's a combination of XLOD, Risk Live, PDFM. Are there any others in that?
Yeah. Actually, in Singapore, we're adding a fin crime event, but yeah, in
That's
essence,
right.
it's those three main ones to start. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So tell us a little bit about what this is going to be all about, when they are, what the vision for it is.
Yeah. So the vision is essentially that our position at the brands that I talked about up front. We've got a unique view on the market, and our content is very highly valued by our subscribers, by our delegates. But increasingly, I've been to so many events over the last few years, and we sit down and we talk about data, or we talk about technology, or we talk about risk management, and actually the whole thing is intertwined. And
Mhm.
it goes back to the same point that you can't really solve any problems without cross-functional teams these days. So from our point of view, it made sense rather than having like these events that they're very deep in their markets, and that's not going to change. They're still going to be very deep in their markets. But actually, rather than holding them in completely separate time zones and different days and different venues, different times of year, why didn't we actually bring them together? And then you've got one key date where, and it goes back to the point I was saying earlier on about scale. You've got something which is then big enough that you can make sure you've got, the absolute best of the best speaking, the absolute best of the best there attending. And then if you're a vendor and you're trying to, get awareness of a product, rather than you've got to go, say you're, trading technology platform, rather than going to three separate events of ours, you can come to one and you've got the decision makers, the influencers, and the buyer all in one place. And we can go broad in sections where we want to go broad, and it makes sense to go broad and get the cross functional view. And then we can still say very, very niche and create the events that are what we're well known for, really. So yeah, in terms of dates, there's one in London. The first one is in London, 30th of June. Then the New York one, my wife will never forgive me for saying this. It's on the 23rd of September. Our events directors put it on the same day as her 50th birthday. So I'm in trouble. I'm in serious trouble at home. Um, and then the Asian one is on the 21st of October in Singapore. So yeah, we've got a lot of work to do in the lead up to it, but they've been really well received. I mean, again, you mentioned the brands earlier on and the evolution of the brands. I still think to this day, I don't think I've ever had a call with anybody where they've said to me, "Our editorial, that's rubbish. I don't like it." Great quality content. So everyone said to us, "Yeah, absolutely, it makes perfect sense." Now, obviously, we've got to execute on it and make sure that it's a good experience because you only get one chance. But I'm really excited about it. Really excited.
Yeah, no, we're excited too. I know we have a couple clients that are interested in it, and I'm personally excited to go as well. So should be good. Excuse me. We'll put the URL in the show notes, but I believe it's risk-markets.com.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Excellent.
All right, man. Well, thanks so much for joining us on at the forefront today, Ben. I really appreciate it, and hope to see you soon.
Thanks for having me. And we'll see you soon. Cheers, Mark.